This church sits at the edge of what became known as Midtown Atlanta, hidden in plain sight amongst skyscrapers, a MARTA station, and the Varsity. When this church was built in 1906, this area was considered the outskirts of Atlanta. But the city grew and enveloped All Saints. And when many downtown churches moved to the suburbs, All Saints made the decision to stay. They decided to remain as a sacred and calming island in a bustling sea of traffic and concrete. We'll explore All Saints Episcopal Church on Sacred Sounds and Spaces.
It's more than a building. It's a place where people have named their hope and their longing.
It's beautiful, it's peaceful.
It's a wonderful jewel box in the middle of the city.
My name is Simon Mannering. I'm the rector of All Saints, and that's another way of saying senior pastor or senior minister of the church. All Saints is a church that loves to gather people from all sorts of places and conditions, just invited to come as you are. And that's reflected in what we offer from that altar as we've gathered people for that holy feast of bread and wine. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, you are welcome at this table. I think people feel that and live that. And that is refreshing and rare in today's society. It's a complex church, as churches go, but it's also this really rich community of human beings.
The reason it was established was because the people in the downtown churches, and that would be down around about where the Capitol is now, it was St. Philip's and St. Luke's, and they wanted a place for their children to go to Sunday school. A gentleman named Richard Peters owned an enormous amount of land from just about where this is over to Piedmont Park, and he owned it. And this was before the turn of the century. And he gave the land. That's how it started. And the first building was a little Sunday school building made out of rough timbers. And that was in 1903. And everybody crowded into this little old building. And if you had a storm, it was just too bad because the lights went out and you just ended the service right then. So in 1906, this building was built. And the Peters family, the wife of Richard Peters, took on furbishing this place. I think, or her family, gave just about everything that you see in the church now. The altar and all the places to sit and everything. Mary Jane Peters gave a couple of the Tiffany windows. We were really, really lucky for her and for someone who came a few years later, who was Thomas Eggleston, and he gave that gorgeous window up there. So we've had wonderful benefactors along the way.
And you can't help but be elevated by the beauty of the physical beauty of the space. The physical building is up for grabs. There's lots of school of thought as to exactly what we're modeled after. At the most basic level, we are considered a neo-Gothic edifice, a neo-Gothic building, if you will. The exterior of it is covered in brownstone, which was quarried from a quarry in Tennessee, which made it a local sort of thing. The church was built in 1906. The building was completed in 1906. And when it was, this was the wilderness. Atlanta was way south. So they really poured a lot of beautiful architecture into the church. It's reminiscent of an English parish church, if you will. But they did just some really exquisite things here. And through the years, they've enhanced that beauty by adding the red to all the spaces, which transformed. It supported our wonderful windows. There are 12 major windows in the church. It's the physical beauty of the place that grabs you first. The windows tell a story. On the south side of the church, they began with the Annunciation window, and they moved through the life of Christ with the Annunciation window, the Christmas window, the Epiphany window, Jesus teaching in the temple, and his baptism. So this side of the church tells his life from birth or before he was born until he was baptized. Then you move to the far side of the church, the north side, and you start when he starts his ministry with Jesus in the wilderness, coming out of the wilderness, realizing that he is fully divine, moving to calling his disciples, to Palm Sunday, to the crucifixion, to the resurrection, and then the ascension. The scene captures what we imagine the ascension actually looked like. You'll see that it's filled with all sorts of people, and I invite you to come and find yourself in that picture. If you imagine if you were at that scene, what would your emotions be? What would your thoughts be in terms of seeing this man floating up to heaven? In the picture, we have those that are devout, that understand what's happening and are duly worshipful. And then we have some that are outright disbelievers. And those people are depicted in the very corners on the edges of the window. So it tells his complete life through pictures. And the artist did an incredible job of capturing not just the visual scene, but the emotion of what was happening during each of these window scenes. So that's the beauty, that's the real secret of these windows. I tell my kids all the time, God is in the details, and that is very much true in these windows. The more you look at them, the more you find.
So there's a window, if you were looking straight at the altar to the left, called the resurrection window. And it's a window whose beauty you only get to see at a certain time in the afternoon, particularly in the winter months, because the light comes in and you see for the first time the complexity of the color and the layers of glass that make up that beautiful Tiffany window. You come another time, ironically, Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, you may not see much of that color at all. That speaks to me of the, I think, sort of almost wonderfully spendthrift invitation of Christian community. Come and be here a while. Come and be here at different times. Come and let your life ebb and flow with this community's ebb and flow. And the windows tell that story. They, of course, tell the story of Jesus' life, the story of one who moved among us. And I love the detail that you see. I actually love to look at the other people in the windows. There's a window of Jesus riding a donkey into Jerusalem, and there's a child to his side, in a way leading the procession. And I love that in this community because children are such a key part of our life. So each church has its own particular charism in terms of how its beauty touches people. This is a very intimate space. There's lots of wood, there's lots of beautiful colored light, and the walls are saturated with prayer. So it's more than a building. It's a place where people have named their hope and their longing. And that kind of intimacy, that kind of belonging, that kind of reaching for eternity, if you like, is reflected in a certain kind of warmth that you experience here. It's not a beauty that you find in other churches that have lots of stone and glass or very high vaulted ceilings. It's a beauty that draws you in to others' lives.
It's the physical beauty of the place that grabs you first. I then came back, and the next thing, interestingly enough, was the music in the place. All Saints has had a long tradition of just exquisite music, just top drawer, top shelf music, and we continue in that tradition today.
So when I'm sitting here during a church service, so many things are going through my head at the same time. If I have practiced enough and well, then I maybe can be a little bit less worried about playing the right notes, although that is always going through my mind as it's going on. When the hymns are happening, I love to be able to be in a place where I can hear how the singing is happening out in the room and sort of assess on the fly what might change minutely with the tempo or change minutely with the volume that I'm producing here and what the choir is doing to aid that. It all is happening at the same time. I would love to say that I can spend the same amount of time at worship as the folks that we are presenting worship for, and that oftentimes is not so much the case. We are blessed here with 3 musicians that run our music program, so there are more times where I can be away from the organ, conducting the choir, sitting and being part of worship, and actually that is very inspiring and feeds my soul in other ways. But there are moments where it's all happening at once and I can just kind of let it go and be at worship. It's beautiful. One of the reasons I love the pipe organ and why the pipe organ is the perfect marriage to a church for worship is that the physics behind the pipe organ sound is the exact same as when we use our voice. So an organ pipe, if you were to see one, is a long cylinder with a mouth at one spot, and the wind comes into that and it sets that column of air into vibration and sound comes out of it. And when we sing, when we speak, of course, but especially when we sing, we inhale air into a column of air, which is our body, and out comes sound. And so when the pipe organ is playing and people are singing hymns along with that, we are literally vibrating together. And so it's a deeper aspect of even looking at each other across the room or being in the room together. We are on a higher plane.
The music, I think, has stayed the same, being top, beautiful quality. The symphony comes in on occasion and it fits right in. Of course, now we have a jazz series, and jazz fits right in too.
And the organ here is extraordinary. It's one of the most extraordinary instruments of its kind in America. My favorite part are the 2 angels that sit on top of the organ that's by the doors, by the narthex of the church, the way out and in. And they're an unnecessary piece of beauty, if beauty can be unnecessary, but you don't need to have angels. The trumpets don't actually make any sound as far as I understand. But they're this sort of extravagant expression of God's hospitality, that God's hospitality is never-ending and abundant. So why not, if you can, have an organ that's just especially beautiful, that we're worth that kind of celebration. God's glory is made manifest in one another. And so I love that we have angels in residence in wood, carved in wood, just as we have them in residence all around us in the city.
So music here at All Saints has had a really wonderful and long history. Many world-renowned musicians, including our most recent organist and choir director emerita, two people, were here for around 40 years and built a program that is really quite incredible of both voices and instruments and organ. The coming together of the visual that you experience when you walk into the room in this space. Of course, the windows are very majestic and unique, and the architecture itself, the woodwork, and the organ itself has a very stunning visual presence in the space. And everything sort of draws your eye upward and uplifts your spirit in that place. We also, flowers are a very important part of what's presented in the space. So you have this marriage of the existing beauty, the windows, the architecture, life in the flowers, also moving upward. And then the music itself adds, as I said when I talked about the organ, it can be a quiet, prayerful thing. It can be a loud and majestic moment, just different ways to express. And all of that comes together to create a very spiritual atmosphere and encourages the singing. So the organ itself and the room with its acoustic treatment allows people to sing together. And also that makes us sort of one body in our worship time.
In today's gospel text, rather than run from the shadows, Mary makes her way to the temple to present her firstborn son to God. One of the largest looming shadows at the time of Jesus' birth and this purification was King Herod. Herod the Great was the king over all 4 political districts in Israel at the time of Jesus' birth, and he was a very insecure leader because he was not the rightful heir to the throne of David. So when he began hearing about a newborn king of the Jews, he had to find a way to stop that threat to his kingdom and his power, and he was determined to kill baby Jesus. In Matthew chapter 2, it tells us that at this time, Herod gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old or younger. So Mary and Joseph, along with their visitors, the Magi, kept Jesus' whereabouts hidden. And when the time came for the purification ritual, in spite of the executive order to kill all newborn boys 2 and under, they kept Jesus alive and took Jesus to Jerusalem and presented Jesus to God at the temple. Mary, the young one, who was blessed and highly favored, walked forward in her faith to fulfill the promise and her godly call. She also defied the darkness of her day. Can you imagine all the rumblings, all of the threats to her baby, and walked through the shadows to present Jesus in the temple? Mary's witness compels us not to run from the shadows, but to move forward in faith.
There was a time when a lot of the churches kind of got on out of here and left the buildings. I don't think we were ever ready to leave. Now, lots of parishioners have left along the way because maybe they didn't see eye to eye, but it just has this feeling that it's here to stay.
One of the really cool things about this place is that we are, at the end of the day, a church is nothing more than a community. It's a community of people that are working together towards a common goal, and through that work, you are able to explore yourself, you're able to grow as a person, and this place allows that. I always marvel at the people that come from great distances and don't just come every now and then. They're here every time the door opens. And that's a real testament to the community that makes up this church, the community that this church is. Because at the end of the day, we only have each other. So we hold on to each other tightly.
There's this beacon of hope on the corner of West Peachtree and North Avenue. That, for me, is exactly what people intended when they built churches. They built them to be distinctive, with steeples and spires that reach to the heavens, so that people, particularly when their life has them looking down at their shoelaces, for whatever reason, start to gaze heavenwards, start to get a more expansive view. So I love that All Saints has remained this persistent part of a kind of icon on the landscape of Atlanta and Midtown. We're right next to a whole bunch of other icons. We're across the street from the Varsity, down the road from Georgia Tech's famous Bobby Dodd Stadium. We're across the street from MARTA, and all of the modern icons. So I love here is a church that remains a steadfast beacon of hope in the city, because it reminds me as a pastor and as a Christian of my vocation and our vocation, simply to be a light in times of joy and in times of darkness. The doors behind me at the end of our services get flung open. So then at the end of a worship service here, you're then drawn out into the light of the world. And because of the beauty of these Tiffany windows, for example, you see that light in a new light, because you've come to see this layering of color and glass, and you've heard stories of God's love and the love that we know in one another's lives. So it's a kind of warmth that you don't get in every church.